Okay, OSHA standard. I just typed this out, so it's going to be, just have to read it. OSHA requires employers to protect their employees from workplace hazards through the use of engineering or work practice controls. When these controls are not feasible or do not provide sufficient protection, the use of personal protective equipment is required. So, when is PPE required? When I can't protect my employees from the workplace hazards through engineering or work practice controls. Engineering controls, work practice controls. If I can't protect the employees using those practices, I have to use PPE. Okay? Employers are required to assist, and this is all, this word for word is on the handout when it comes around. Okay? I put a lot of information on the handout. That's good stuff to know for the test on this one. And no, I have not proofread this. If somebody would like to volunteer to work for free and proofread this, then actually I need somebody who's one of the, are you recording this? Man, I can't say it. All right. Employers are required to assess the workplace to determine if hazards are present or are likely to be present, which necessitates the use of PPE. If employees use PPE, employers must establish general procedures called a PPE program. General procedures called a PPE program to give employees necessary protective equipment and to train them to use it properly. So if at any time in the workplace I could have a hazard that requires PPE, then I have to develop a program called a PPE program that it provides the equipment and provides training on when to use it properly. Or when to use it and how to use it properly. Okay? So, if we're going to be working on electrical equipment, okay, then I have to train you on, if we're working on energized electrical equipment, I have to train you on the PPE required to work on that. Does that make sense? Everybody got that? Okay. Wrong way. Okay. Somehow the formatting is messed up on this. Upon completion of the lesson, you guys will be able to describe the two primary means of protecting employees from workplace hazards prior to considering personal protective equipment. Okay? What two means do we have? Engineering controls and work practice controls, right? Those are the two primary means of protecting employees from workplace hazards prior to considering PPE. If I can protect you using those two things, you don't need PPE. Explain what should be included in a personal protective equipment training program. List PPE that may be used to protect the eye, face, should be a comma there, head, feet, hands, arms, bodies, and hearing. Identify hazards that are lessened or eliminated by using the appropriate PPE for eye protection, hearing, foot, hand protection, face protection, body protection. Has everybody got a handout? I put all that stuff is under the specific objectives. I included that in the handout. Okay? Possible answers. Okay.
Where are we at? You're losing me.
I just went over the objectives. I don't have the way these handouts are written, this is just information. All I have to do is provide you information. The first thing is the standards. That's the OSHA standards, which what cover PPE are on the back under references. Okay, this is just a brief description of what that standard covers in general. Okay.
I was looking for what you just said were answers.
Okay, I read the learning objectives 1, 2, 3, and 4. And under 1, I listed, the learning objective said describe the two primary means of protecting employees from workplace hazards prior to considering PPE. These are the two primary means of protecting: engineering controls and work practice controls. I define engineering controls. Engineering control physically changes the machine or work environment to prevent employee exposure to a potential hazard. Work practice controls, they remove employees from exposure to potential hazards by changing the way they do their jobs. So I define those two things. And then there's a list of things that can be considered engineering controls and work practice controls. We'll go over them a little bit later in the slide, but that's how you read this. So there's 6 bullets there that are considered engineering controls. Isolate a process, enclose a process so you can't get to it. Consider design specifications, so design something so maybe you don't need 120 volts. Maybe you can get by with 24. Change the process, okay? Maybe we don't need it this high a temperature, or this high a flow or pressure, okay? Change the process. You can throw ventilation in there. Use proper ventilation so I don't have to worry about PPE. What you guys don't see, a lot of places PPE is like respirators and stuff, okay? So, and then substitute less harmful material, okay? Don't use asbestos, okay? Use something else. Work practice controls, the same things. Keep dust down, use wet, like cutting tile. I can use a grinding wheel or I can use a wet saw, right? Wet saw, less dust. Personal hygiene. Use deodorant so you don't stink so bad. Okay, actually that personal hygiene is one. Housekeeping and maintenance and rotation of workers. That just keeps them so they're not tired doing the work. Okay. Okay. So that's kind of what the handout is. Just know the stuff on the handout, you'll be okay. Not to take away from this. Employers must protect employees from workplace hazards such as machines. Okay, I already read that. Use all feasible engineering and work practice controls to eliminate and reduce hazards. Then use appropriate PPE if these controls do not eliminate the hazards. So those two things, engineering controls and work practice controls, can keep me from having to use PPE if I can follow. Does that make sense? Okay. It doesn't mean if the hazards can exist at any time, I don't have to have the PPE present, because I might not, in specific instances, be able to eliminate the hazard using those controls. Then I have to rely on PPE. Okay? All right. Remember, PPE is the last level of control. And again, some of these slides are made by OSHA, some are made by me. I just can't get out of the OSHA format. The blue is driving me bonkers. When payment for PPE. When PPE is required to protect employees, it must be provided by the employer at no cost to employees except for specific items, such as safety toe footwear. I don't have to buy you safety toe footwear. Okay? Prescription safety eyewear. I don't have to buy that. Everyday clothing and weather-related gear and logging boots. Why don't I have to buy you safety toe footwear? You can wear them riding a motorcycle. Okay? Prescription safety eyewear. You can wear them out cutting firewood for your house. If it's stuff that you can use other places, I don't have to buy it. If it's stuff you could use as personal gear elsewhere, I don't have to buy it. Engineering controls. This is an engineering control. If the machine or work environment can be physically changed to prevent employee exposure to the potential hazard, then the hazard can be eliminated with an engineering control. And that's what I just read off of Mary's handout. Okay? So, if the machine or work environment can be physically changed to prevent employee exposure to the potential hazard, then I can use an engineering control to eliminate the hazard. Okay? So, if I've got a hearing hazard and I can enclose the source of that noise in a room that prevents the noise from being at a decibel level where I need hearing protection outside the room, then I physically change the atmosphere so that I no longer need hearing PPE outside that room. Does that make sense? You still need it inside. But where before I would have needed it in my whole floor, now I only need it outside the room. So I physically change something. Okay? If I need high temperature issues, but the process doesn't need to be at a high temperature, it just is, I can put a heat exchanger to cool that process down prior to the piping getting into my area, or I can insulate that piping so I can't touch it. I do something physical to eliminate the need for PPE. then it's an engineering control. Make sense? Everybody got it? Understand this. Engineering controls, these are the examples that I copied down for you. Examples of engineering controls. Initial design specifications. Just change the parameters so that they're no longer in the band where I need PPE. Less harmful material, that's don't use asbestos. Change the process and close the process or isolate the process. That's doing something physical to what is causing the hazard to make it no longer a hazard. Isolate it. I can change it so it's not a hazard. Okay? What was the other one? Oh, ventilation. Okay? Ventilation, if I have proper ventilation, I might not need a respirator in there. Okay? Those are engineering controls. Work practice controls. If employees can be removed from exposure to the potential hazard by changing the way they do their jobs. I'm not physically changing the process or physically eliminating the hazard. I'm changing what my employees do, how they perform their job to eliminate the hazard. That's a work practice control. Okay? If I can do this, then the hazard can be eliminated with the work practice control. Work practice controls, and there's the same list that you have on there. Use of wet methods to suppress dust, so I don't need a respirator anymore. Okay? Personal hygiene, housekeeping and maintenance, job rotation of workers. Those are all work practice controls. Okay? Examples of PPE. For eye protection, safety glasses or goggles. For the face, face shield. Face shields are not eye protection. Okay? If a job requires eye protection, a face shield will not count. Okay? There are jobs where you'll need eye protection and face protection, so you'll be wearing both.
It says face shields on the eyes or on the paper. It says eyes, goggles, safety glasses, and face shields.
That's, damn it, Mike. I'm not saying you're wrong. Okay, scratch that out because that's wrong. I typed this, so I typed it, so it's my bad. Okay, head. What protects you from head damage? Hard hats, right? Feet, you need safety shoes. Hands and arms, you can use gloves. Bodies, you use vests. Hearing, earplugs or ear muffs. There's also a thing you can use. It's called it's not a plug. Yeah, it's a cap or something. They have
Canal caps.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, did I put that on there?
Yeah.
Canal caps, right. It's something, I don't know, it's described in the OSHA thing. It's not a plug. Does anybody know what a canal cap is? Okay, canal cap is ear protection, just know that. Okay. Where did my mouse go? Okay, establishing a PPE program. You have to do an assessment to determine if you need it, right? So what this PPE program does, it establishes your procedures for determining the type of PPE. Okay, it says for selecting, providing, and using PPE as part of an employer's routine operation. So, if you have engineering controls, and if you have work practice controls, and if you still have hazards, then you have to provide PPE. If there are times where normally you have those, but there are times in your routine operation where those are no longer work for you, then you have to have PPE. So you might have engineering and work practice controls, but say you have to shut this one system down, say ventilation, then you no longer have that specific control, right? Then you have to have PPE there for the times when it is shut down. If it's part of normal operation. Say you have to clean a filter or something. You got to secure ventilation to change that filter. Okay? During that time you might need PPE, so you have to have PPE because it is a routine part of your work practices for a small period of time. Does that make sense? Okay. Did I go too far? Yeah. Okay, so what you want to do is you're going to assess the workplace to see what hazards are present, okay, which will need PPE. Then, once the proper PPE has been selected, the employer must provide training to each employee who is required to use PPE. That's a big thing, who's required to use it. If your job doesn't entail that, you don't have to be trained on it, okay? Right? If your job description says you need to be able to do this one thing, and at times you're going to need PPE, then you're going to have to be trained on that specific PPE. Okay? Don't use PPE if you're not trained on it. Okay? If you think you need to use it and it was an oversight, maybe you were sick that day, or maybe the trainer was sick that day, or whatever, make sure you get the training. Make sure you bring that up. Okay? If you're required to use PPE, you got to know this at a minimum. When it's necessary. So what are the conditions to use it? What type is necessary? Okay, so if you have leather gloves and electrical gloves and you're doing hot work, do you need electrical gloves? No. Okay? So know what you need. How to properly put on, take off, adjust, and wear. You'll hear that talk called don and doff. So donning PPE is putting it on. Doffing PPE is taking it off. You'll hear those terms every now and then. What the limitations of the PPE are. If you're working on a 4160 volt system and you have 00 gloves, are those legal? Okay. You have to look at what the PPE is. If these earmuffs, or a big one is the cartridges. Okay. If you've got a mask and you have just a general use cartridge, they don't always work on. Those are more particulate filters, not gaseous filters, so they won't work on like poisonous gas. So make sure you know what the specifications of the PPE are that you're using. Proper care, maintenance, and useful life and disposal. Okay? Proper care, that means when you're using them, don't use electrical gloves to grind in. Okay? Doesn't make sense. Before you use PPE, you should always inspect it. Make sure you know what the inspections are. Okay? When you take it off, store it back in its proper place. PPE doesn't get set on a bench and used, just left out to be exposed to whatever. Chemicals might drip on it. Some PPE, the sun isn't good for it, okay? You might set something on with a sharp edge and cut through it. So put PPE away. Whether it's your personal stuff or the employer bought it, okay? If it's damaged, it's got to be replaced. If the employer provides it and through negligence you damage it, the employer doesn't have to replace it if it's just for you. Okay, you have to pay to replace it. And there's a time, I was required to have steel-toed boots out at the site for a while, one job I was doing, so they had to provide them. They only had to provide me one pair every 12 months. So if I damaged them through my negligence or wore them outside, and they were no good after 6 months, I had to replace them. And they had to be inspected. I couldn't have exposed metal on the steel toe. So I had to take care of them. And if it was less than 12 months, they didn't have to replace them. So make sure. And disposal. Make sure you dispose of things properly. Okay? Some areas, if you have PPE on, like an asbestos area, you can't just take that off and throw it in the trash. Okay? It's got to be bagged up the proper way so that the asbestos can't be poofed out. Some containers, if you're in an environment and you're breathing in this atmosphere, now that container, you can't just unscrew it and throw it in the trash can and screw another one on. You have to dispose of that container correctly. So make sure you get rid of your PPE the proper way. But you have to be trained on how to do that. That's part of the training. Eye protection, we're going to go through some specifics here. Some causes of eye injuries: dust and other flying particles such as metal shavings or sawdust. molten metal that might splash, acids and other caustic liquid chemicals that might splash, blood and other potentially infectious body fluids that might splash, spray, or splatter. So if somebody takes one to the jugular, you know, put something, if you're going to go help him, eye protection is now not just gloves, but eye or face protection. So if they're spurting out like this, you know, you want to have something to keep from your ingestion area, eyes, nose, mouth. Intense light such as that created by welding and lasers. Okay, these little lasers that you have for pointers that everybody uses, are they hazardous to your eyes?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a warning on them. Every laser has a warning on them. Safety spectacles. Made with metal plastic safety frames, most operations require side shields. Safety glasses, the side shields are required by the job or by the job site, okay? Safety glasses are still safety glasses without side shields, okay? But it really doesn't make sense to wear glasses like mine, like I have in the past counted as safety glasses, without protecting from coming in the sides. It protects here, but not here. So, I mean, if I'm looking at something and it's bouncing off, and all of a sudden I turn this far, now it's bouncing in here. So it doesn't make sense to have safety glasses without side shields, but they're still safety glasses, okay? So it's the job site or the job description that will require the side shields. Used for moderate impact from particles produced by such jobs as these, okay? Carpentry, woodworking, grinding, scale. Goggles protect eyes, eye sockets, and the facial area immediately surrounding the eyes from impact, dust, and splashes. That's the difference, okay? The eye socket. Some goggles fit over corrective lenses. Some goggles, they make an insert that you have the goggles on the outside and they'll snap inside. Some face masks do that. So there's all different kinds of stuff out there. It's just how much you want to pay for it. Welding shields. Burns from infrared or intense radiation light. Protect face and eyes from flying sparks, metal spatter, slag, chips, produced from welding, brazing, soldering, and cutting. The plasma cutter down there in the lab, has anybody here used that plasma cutter? Are you required to have eye protection with that?
Yes.
Okay. Is that eye protection sufficient for welding? No. So the plasma cutter, I don't know what these numbers mean, but I know the plasma cutter requires a level 5 for darkness. The welder requires, I think, 9 or 10 or 11, something like that. So the welding does require, if you've got goggles or glasses that are good for the plasma cutter, they might not work for the welder, okay, because they're just not as dark. So make sure you have the right ones for the job. Laser safety goggles. Okay, they're there. I know nothing else about them. Face shields protect the face from nuisance dust and potential splashes or sprays of hazardous liquids. Do not protect employees from impact hazards. Okay, so it won't protect the top of your head and it won't protect you from a 2x4 whacking you in the face. Okay. Head protection. What are some of the causes of head injuries? Falling objects. Bumping your head. Contact with exposed electrical conductors. Okay. Do hard hats protect you from electrical contact? Some do. Okay. Hard hats that protect you from electrical contact. If they have stickers, some of those metallic stickers, if you got hit there and the hard hat was touching your ear, it might not conduct, but if you have a metal sticker up there, now you take the potential like from up here down to here, and now it might conduct. Hard hats, if they're